Here is a step involved to create a Spring Boot application and ensure that the Spring Boot application is deployed into an external server like WildFly. So here, the one important thing that we have to notice here is the packaging segment. So while we create the Spring Boot application, we need to ensure that the packaging is selected to be a var. As we discussed, when we want to deploy our application into a WildFly server, which is Java EE server, then we need to change this jar archive to a var archive, because jar will ensure that it has its all components integrated into the jar to make sure that the application is self-executable. It also carries the embedded server in it. But the var archive does not carry the embedded server in it. It will carry only the artifacts that are essentially required for the application to get executed in an external Java Enterprise Edition based servers like WildFly or JBoss for that matter. So the most important thing is we need to change the archive pattern from jar to var. Rest is all the same setup, as you can go ahead and choose your build tools of Maven, the Java version that you wanted to choose, and also the language that you want to use here will all be the same. There's no change. The only change that we need to make here is packaging. So in order to change the package, just go ahead and select this drop down, and you'll find a var packaging and choose that var packaging. What difference it will make is we will see when the application project structure gets created. So hit next, and here we are going to choose the Spring Web dependency, which we usually have it in order to create an endpoints, and hit next and click finish. So by this way, a Spring Boot project gets created. It's the same style of how it happens for the jar archive. For the var also, the structure remains the same. The only difference that we have to notice here is in the package, the base package, we usually get the root class, which carries a main method and annotated with add Spring Boot application, which is a traditional way of creating a Spring Boot application class. But along with that, now we can notice that there is a servlet initializer class also got created. This is an additional class that gets appeared whenever we go for the creation of the var archive. So since at the time of creating the project we have chosen the var archive as the archive pattern, this additional class gets created. So what this servlet initializer does is, as the name suggests, it is going to initialize the server into the var archive. Since we are going for an external deployment, we need to have this class to be created, and we are not creating it. Upon creating the project, this class also gets added into the project structure. The reason is we have chosen the archive pattern to be a var archive. So what it does is it actually extends the class, abstract class called Spring Boot Servlet Initializer. It helps to initialize the servlet into the var, which this class is not required if we are archiving the Spring Boot project into a jar, because jar will have the embedded servlet in it, and embedded servlet container is also going to be carried in the jar, because the server itself, Tomcat as in this case as a default, the Tomcat server is going to be embedded into the jar itself. But that's not the case for var. Var archive will not carry its embedded server. The reason is we are going to exclude the usage of the embedded server, since we are going to deploy them into an external Java EE server like WildFly, which does not require or support the embedded server anymore. So at that point of time, we need to explicitly mention that the servlet initialization has to happen, and for that the configuration codes have to be written here, and this will take care of initializing the servlet that's essentially required to handle the incoming request and hand over the response, and that will get registered into the application server, that's the WildFly server, while the application is going to get deployed. So this is the only difference that you will be noticing while we archive them into a var. If it is a jar, this servlet initializer class will not be present. Instead, it's going to carry only the single main entry class which holds a main method in it. So this is the difference in the project structure upon creating it as a var archive. If you go down to the pom.xml, you can notice in the overview tab where it is mentioned that the packaging is var. So this ensures that this whole project is readily available to get archived to a pattern of a var archive rather than a jar.